Hi, I'm Joan Craig with Choose Joyful Health, and today I'm really happy to be here with Val Minkowski from Urban Seas Aquaculture. Urban Seas is a shrimp farm right here in Greenville, South Carolina, and I'm going to let Val tell you more about it. But the reason I'm happy to be here today is that I've been interested in sustainable food choices for a long time, and I want to learn today, or we want to learn with you, how Urban Seas is farming in a way that's good for our health, but also good for the environment. So, Val, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I would love it if you could just give us an overview about, and we can give the readers and listeners an overview about your company, how you got into it, and what you're doing here.
Yeah. So, like you said, we're a shrimp farm located in Greenville, South Carolina. And I have a doctorate degree in fisheries and aquatic sciences. So I've been really interested in sustainable fisheries and that whole movement for some time now. That's what I studied. That's kind of my passion. But then we moved here to Greenville because my husband got a job here and there's no ocean here. So it was a little difficult for me, but we both fell in love with Greenville and we wanted to stay here. And I knew about these kinds of shrimp farms in other places such as Ohio, Indiana, a couple other inland places, and I always thought, oh, Greenville would be perfect because we're very local based, sustainability conscious. A lot of restaurants are farm to table, that kind of thing. And so the idea kind of turned into Greenville would be perfect to, hey, why don't I start this? Like, let's just go for it. So it kind of just happened really overnight.
But didn't it also have something to do with, this is what I gained from looking at your website, that you were down at the coast and you observed some of the damages to the environment that were happening in the shrimp industry. And I didn't know anything about that, and I love to eat shrimp. So tell us about what you saw that made you think that indoor farming was a better bet, or maybe I'm sure there's indoor and outdoor. So what made you decide to go this route?
Yeah.
Besides that you were in the mountains.
Exactly. So like I said, I've been always interested in sustainable fisheries. And so that in and of itself is such a broad topic that it's kind of hard to focus on one specific species and say if that's good or that's bad. The general rule of thumb that I try and follow is how fish are being fished. And so when you go off the coast, the way they fish for shrimp is it's basically like a big bulldozer. They take a giant net behind their boat and they just drag it through the substrate.
What substrate?
The benthic bottom, the bottom of the
ocean.
Yeah, so the bottom of the ocean. So wherever they are, it just kind of scrapes along the bottom and picks up all the shrimp. And so they get a lot of shrimp, which is great for them, but it also brings up everything else in the path. And so I kind of think of it as a giant bulldozer just going through the forest.
Like clear cutting.
It's exactly like clear cutting. And so the shrimp populations themselves are just fine. They grow really fast. They come back. They rebound. They are fine, but it's the other impact that this bulldozer has on the environment and killing everything else on the benthic habitat, such as all the other organisms. The substrate itself is being destroyed. So it's really not good for the oceans. So that's kind of what draws you away from open sea shrimping, is it's not really the safest practice in terms of other species that it's being harmed. And it also brings up a bunch of other species that they don't necessarily want to catch, so they just throw them overboard, but they're already dead. So you're killing turtles and you're killing, larger fish that you're not eating, but they're dying in effect of what you're doing. So it's not really the safest practice. And so then people turn to inland farming for shrimp, or coastal farms, which are basically just large basins on the coast.
In the ocean or in the wetlands?
So they're actually in the ocean, right on the coast. There is kind of just like a giant pen, which you think would be great because it's all contained. They don't have to kill the bottom. It's only shrimp in there. But what happens is the shrimp are bred in such a high biomass, so there's so many shrimp in there.
Dense.
It's very dense in there. It's overcrowded, and what they're feeding the shrimp is also just going back out into the ocean. So when tides come, it's turning out the water, and shrimp excrement in high concentrations is really toxic to mangrove forests. And so when you have a high biomass right on the coast, and all their excrement is kind of being spread along the coast, it's killing all the mangroves.
Those are trees.
So they're
And
trees
everything that lives in them.
and everything that lives in them. So it's destroying the coast itself because they're a natural buffer for the ocean coming into land, and they're also killing all the organisms that live in the mangrove forests. So those necessarily aren't the best way to grow shrimp either, because that's also environmentally unfriendly. So it kind of turns into this indoor system, which is a self-contained system of shrimp in itself, but we have no water reaching out into the environment, so there's no, it's not killing anything.
You're filtering out the excrement.
Exactly.
So you gave us a ton of information. So I just want to backtrack and summarize, because I didn't know all this stuff. So let's go back. So the basically what we would say maybe a regular way of fishing shrimp would be to use the bulldozer. The trough.
That's the most common.
And is that must be in somewhat shallow areas? Is that where shrimp normally live?
Yep, so it all depends on the species of shrimp. What you're getting off the coast here in South Carolina is generally a shallower shrimp. So it's usually in the channels. Like if you go to Charleston and you're going out of the harbor there, you'll see a lot of shrimping boats come in. They're still probably dredging right there.
Okay. Are there shrimp that live in deeper places?
Yep.
And there are people that catch them?
Yep.
Okay.
And they say that they're not as bad because in that aspect they don't use this bulldozer method, but they use big seine nets or big nets. But it's the same. They're still catching all the other bycatch. So it doesn't necessarily kill the whole bottom habitat, but it definitely catches a lot of fish species that you don't want to be catching.
So would shrimp be, so okay, and I've done some research on wild caught fish versus farmed fish, and for the many years I was only choosing wild caught, and I was only teaching my students to do that because I thought that was the best thing nutritionally. And then I started to think about the sustainability issue, interview more people, and I learned that sometimes the farm fishing is a better choice. So would shrimp be a choice? I mean, obviously you're going to eat shrimp that you're growing, but for the average consumer, like let's say I go out to eat in a restaurant, and I'm going to ask some questions.
Yes.
What are maybe like the levels of good? that's not the right way to ask that question.
No.
What are the levels of like best practices? Middle, okay, and you know, if you're really hungry and there's nothing else on the menu.
So Monterey Bay Seafood Watch is actually a really great program. They go through and label it red, which is bad, green, which is good, and yellow, which is okay. So it kind of is that tiered system. In terms of my personal experience, I wouldn't get any imported shrimp. Because we really just don't know. Because we have no idea where it's coming from. It could be farmed in these horrible farms that are in sewage water.
Right.
They also inject shrimp with silicone to make them look bigger. So half your meat is not necessarily. Yes, exactly. So half your meat is not actually shrimp meat.
Silicone.
It's silicone.
That's terrifying.
Because there's no regulations on the seafood coming into the United States.
Wow, none.
Not in
Unless
fish.
they have a certificate. Now, can we backtrack again? And I still want to even circle back to some of the things you said. So I've also interviewed the Marine Stewardship Council and the Aquaculture Stewardship Council. Those videos are on the Choose Joyful Health website. So in my understanding, if they've been certified by one of them, then it is okay because the standard is international.
Exactly.
And we know that they have met X, Y, and Z to make sure it's not hurting the environment and the workers are paid and all of those good things. So we know, but that's not available everywhere.
Right.
I mean, it's a great program, and then there's growing awareness of it. So the Monterey Bay is a good one. Monterey Bay, you're participating in their program.
Yes.
So I want to go there. So we've got those options. I just wanted to backtrack because you mentioned the bulldozer style, and then you mentioned the pens at the coast and the mangrove forest, and then and then the only other one is this indoor circulating system.
Yes.
So there's not fish that are getting grown in like lakes, anything like that.
So different fish are, So these systems I talked about only pertain to shrimp.
Okay, that's
so it's shrimp special. other species, there's a variety of aquaculture farms. There's a variety of fishing methods.
Right.
It all depends on a species per species basis.
So let's go to Monterey Bay, and I would love for you to tell us what you had to do as a company to get listed with them or participate with them.
So they're a great company. Like I said, they have the tiers. For a business to get listed with them and get approved by them, you just have to prove that you are environmentally safe. And so we are, because we don't have any effluents going out into the environment. We have no bycatch because there's nothing else being grown in our systems. And so they kind of have their own
They have like a list,
regulation,
checklist.
exactly, that you have to check off.
Right.
And then we have to certify that we only are selling these shrimp. So we can't be a business and then import shrimp and sell those in our systems.
Right. You're only doing one thing.
Exactly.
Well, I know we want to go take a tour, but before we go in there, could you also tell us where we can buy this? Like, besides coming over here and buying it, can people get your products in local stores, and are there restaurants that are serving your shrimp?
So the goal is eventually, yes. Right now we're still pretty small, so we just can't keep up with the demand that restaurants ask for. So long term, yes, that's our goal, is we'll sell to restaurants. But as of right now, it's just individual basis. So I just post on our social media and our website and our listservs when we have a harvest in one of our tanks, and you come here and buy it.
Wow.
Yeah,
So you
or
really
we
have to
go
be in
and
the know.
deliver it. Yeah,
I didn't hear about you until recently.
Yeah, so
How long have you been in business?
so we started the business 2 years ago. We've been selling shrimp for about a year now.
Okay, great. So still new at it.
Yes, we're still working out our kinks.
Wow, good. Well, maybe we should go take a look.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. So this is the nursery in this room right here. This is where we're going to be growing our baby shrimp until they're about 1 gram, and then we're going to stock in the tanks with them. So you're going to come in. These are our tanks. If you look inside, you might oh my god, they're tiny. They're just almost invisible. Yeah. Most larval, so once they turn into larvae, you count the number of days after that happens. And so these are 12 days old, or they're about 20 days old. So they were, if you couldn't see, I mean, they were like tiny. They were like a little string with a little, maybe a little. They're 1 gram, 0.01 grams. So they were like a centimeter long. Yeah, maybe. So we just saw the shrimp that are about 20 days old, and they were maybe a centimeter in length. They were as thin as maybe 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters, and they had just a little dark spot, which is their intestines.
Yep.
So they're almost invisible in those nets, and those are 20 days old. So tell us what happened before that.
So they came from a hatchery in Florida, and this place in Florida raises them from when they're eggs to when they're post-larval, which is what we've seen. And so once they hit post-larval stage, they can kind of grow them themselves, and then they ship them up here at post-larval 12 days old. So we get them when they're 12 days old, which is
so shrimp lay eggs.
Yes.
I don't know. And then they must be tiny.
Yeah.
Invisible.
Super
So
small.
is this happening in a laboratory or in a pool or?
Yep, in a lab. So they have tons of step systems. So it's a pretty intense process, which is why we're not a hatchery as of yet.
It's not artificial insemination. They're naturally.
No, it's naturally, yeah. So they have thousands of shrimp, kind of in big tanks, and then they get them to breed, and then they collect the eggs off the surface. They'll float to the surface, and they collect all the eggs and put them in separate tanks, and wait and feed them special diets and monitor the water and all that stuff, and then wait until they hatch.
What do they eat? And how?
That's a good question.
Do they have mouths?
No, not when they're eggs. It's really just monitoring the water quality. So you're not necessarily feeding the larval.
The eggs just grow
just grow naturally. So you just want to make sure your water quality is very similar to the ocean. So it's, in terms of salinity, it's great. It doesn't have any high bacteria spikes and that kind of thing to stress them out.
And so at this stage, now that they're here with you, post-larval,
Yeah.
20 days, what are they eating?
So we feed, so the small ones, before they reach a gram, they're on a powdered diet. So it's a powdered mix of different algae.
And is that what they would absorb from the water in
And
nature?
so, yeah, when they're post-larval, they do have mouse, so they will eat it. And so that's kind of what they're scurrying on the ground. They live in rocks and in the gravel.
I heard they were ground feeders, and they really do live on the bottom.
And
have
they'll
little
eat
legs,
anything.
right?
Yep, and they have little eggs.
And they have legs, right?
Legs, yep,
So they
legs.
walk on the
mini
ground?
shrimp, basically.
Do they swim or do they walk?
So both. They use their legs to walk, but they also have a tail which can propel them in the water. So it's not technically swimming, but it's
they
propulsion.
do live at the bottom.
Yes.
Okay, so when we're talking about, wow, okay, so what do you do to the water here? Where does it come from and what do you do to it?
Let you take it.
We use tap water, but since tap water in Greenville has like some chlorine and some other things that we don't necessarily want in it,
Fluoride?
Fluoride. We let it sit for at least 10 days before we use it or put anything in it. So all that stuff just kind of like vaporizes, and we call it degassing.
Does it?
Yes.
So the chloramines that are left over from the chlorine treatment process will degas?
Yes.
A majority of them, yeah.
But fluoride wouldn't, would it?
No, fluorine would stay in there, but we don't really that doesn't bother us.
It
as
doesn't
much.
bother
Yeah.
the shrimp. That's fascinating. So, and then do you add salt?
Yes, we do add a lot of salt. It takes a lot of salt to raise it up to the salinity that we want. That would be in the ocean. So maybe like at least 25 ppm or pp parts per thousand. So yeah, we have to add all the salt before we start adding shrimp.
And where do you get the salt?
We buy it from
Like
just
Costco?
Amazon.
Or-
Yeah,
You guys
exactly.
have like huge.
We
quantities.
do. We have huge. It's similar if you go to an aquarium store, where they make their salt.
Sea salt?
Yeah, it's just called sea salt. It's not like table salt, so it has different chemicals and processes in it to make it. But yeah, you can buy it on Amazon.
Oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Okay, so next we're going to see what happens after they're in that post-larval stage.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So in this tank, we have some adult shrimp that are 4 to 5 months old. They're almost ready to harvest, actually. But they've just been kind of hanging out in this tank, been feeding them every day, making sure the water quality has been good. So they're just growing up, basically, from the post-larval size.
Now, what do you feed them at this stage? Now they're bigger, so what are they eating?
We feed them a pellet diet, so we just have little pellets that are about this big. And then the adults, when they're this age, can also eat the biofloc, which is why the water is brown. The browner the water, the better. That just means there's more food for them available to eat.
What is biofloc?
Biofloc is kind of a composite of different bacteria that comes from the air. We don't seed the tanks. It just comes from the air and starts like multiplying.
Actually, it's like probiotics?
It,
Like good bacteria?
It
for
is
them?
all good bacteria.
Yeah. Now, what's in the pellets?
There's a mixture of like protein, algae, different things that would probably reflect what the shrimp eat in the wild.
Okay.
In the natural diet.
Fascinating. And so,
Like
like
a
show
wholesome
itself?
yeah.
Woo, nice. So the water is really bubbly and murky, but the browner the better. The browner the better. Because that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Oh, they're really jumping.
Yeah, they are really jumpy.
Can you get them? Here. Whoa, they're big.
Yeah, these guys are almost ready to come out.
Those are big shrimp. Oh my God. Look at their eyes. Their eyes are glowing.
Yeah. And that's some of the food.
Those are the pellets. They're really jumping around. They have more legs than I realized.
They're really
I've actually never seen live shrimp before.
They're
So
really powerful.
You know, when you buy them, they're curled up in a circle. But alive, they're long.
Yeah.
We'll put them back. We don't want to dye them. We don't want to kill them. I mean, because they.
We they need to go back in the water before they
Yeah, they can stay on for a little bit, a couple seconds.
For these guys, I don't know if you can see them like twitching. They're really muscular and strong, so that's how they swim in the water column. Is they like flip their body in half and just like shoot backwards.
Wow.
It's hard to see in here now. You can see.
And so, how many shrimp are in this tank?
We probably have around 10,000 in this tank.
And now this to me looks like an above the ground swimming pool. That we had when we were
It
kids. So, and then, how would this compare to how they would live in the wild as far as how close they would be to each other?
I'm not really sure how the population density in the wild. It depends. For example, in the coastal shrimp farms, they would probably be more dense.
Yeah.
But we make sure that these guys have enough space.
Yeah.
So that they're happy.
How awesome. All right, so we're wrapping up our tour. We've learned a lot. We've come out here where it's a little quieter. And Alden is 2 months old. He's the Urban Seas family, Val's son. And we're just tickled that she was kind enough to speak to us while running her business and raising her first child. So congratulations on that.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions came up while we were looking at the tank, so it's loud in there. So what does a shrimp eat in the wild?
So shrimp in the wild are scavengers, which means they'll eat anything that they can. So they live on the bottom, the seafloor, and they'll just crawl around in basically anything that fits in their mouth. So that can be algae, that can be small amoebas, that could be microorganisms, that could also be plastics that we pollute it with. So really anything that's in their
And
mouth.
based on the size of the shrimp we saw, which about that, I'm guessing the mouth is not bigger than my.
It's pretty small. Yeah.
It's pretty small. So, and then what are you feeding them in here?
So we are feeding them pellet food. We get it from a manufacturer that specifically manufactures food for aquaculture industry, so indoor farming. So it won't go out in the wild, and it's kind of a mix of everything that they would get in the wild.
Okay. And one other couple follow-up questions that came up. You mentioned the water is recirculating. What do you do to it during that process?
So the advantage of these systems is that the water does recirculate itself. So once the water or the shrimp are grown and we harvest them out of the tank, we use that exact same water. So we'll add new shrimp right into that same tank. So we don't really have any wastewater.
So how are you filtering out?
It doesn't need to be filtered.
Oh.
So that the biofloc itself is what grows from the unfilteredness, and it's healthy bacteria that the shrimp can then eat. So it doesn't need a filter on
What about their excrement?
it. So they eat that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the flock itself is we feed the shrimp their food. And then the shrimp excrement, and then we add a carbon source to help with the carbon to nitrogen ratio of the tank. And so the carbon, the excrement, and the food all kind of make this biofloc, this bacteria.
And they eat it.
Which they can eat. So it's
That's
kind
amazing.
of one of the specialties of this specific aquaculture facility is shrimp and tilapia are the only species that can healthily eat their excrement. And will process it all healthily in their gut.
When I interviewed the ASC, she talked about integrated aquaculture. So this would be an example. She said you take the waste and sometimes you feed it to a different species, and that's normal.
That's exactly, that's
Wow.
perfectly normal. And so a lot of species can eat the waste products of other species, but not themselves. Shrimp are specific in that they can eat it themselves.
And then one other thing that you mentioned there, again, it was a little bit loud, is the type of shrimp you're growing and maybe why you chose them. And then we'll wrap up.
So we're growing Pacific white shrimp. It's one of the common names. Most commonly consumed shrimp in the United States. We're growing it mostly because it is the most commonly consumed shrimp, but it's what everyone's familiar with.
And they look big.
Yeah.
Are they gonna? Is that considered like a, when you go to the restaurant and it's like they have jumbo shrimp? Is that a jumbo shrimp?
So those terms are a little hard for me, but yes, they would be considered jumbo shrimp. We sell ours at 21 to 24 shrimp per pound, which equals every shrimp itself is about 18 to 20 grams.
Wow. Well, we have learned so much today.
Yeah.
Thank you to Erin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Val, and thank you
Alden. Yeah.
for being part of the tour, and it's just
Thank
been
you.
really interesting. So the takeaway for me, and I hope for anyone who watches this, is what I've been teaching for a long time is know where your food comes from, specifically animal proteins, and now again with fish and seafood as well. Do the research, ask the questions, and the more we request from our store managers and our restaurant owners that we're looking for sustainably caught or harvested seafood products and all food products, the more they're going to respond and be able to provide that. So there's more resources at choosejoyfulhealth.com and at urbanseasaquaculture.com. We'll make sure the links for those are available for you. So thanks a lot, and peace.